Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions. With your host Brian. We're going to wrap up today's exploration of new music, looking at one that's a hair bit older, but the premise has interested me. We're looking at Genesis Owusu. This track, specifically called Stay Blessed, has been described as hip hop post punk. And that sounds pretty cool because I like hip hop's style, but the lack of dynamic elements in most mainstream hip hop, which has been my exploration of it, just doesn't do enough to keep me around. And I think putting the rapping on top of some post punk sonic exploration might be a formula that I need to really enjoy a style that's similar or adjacent to traditional hip hop. So, with that said, let's dive into this and check out what Genesis Owusu is doing with Stay Blessed. We got an epilepsy warning. Okay, this is a fun little opening right here. Just drum and bass right here then. Actually, I think that's a guitar. Yeah, it is a guitar, and we just opened up the filter on it too. I like the melodic vocalizations. There is a bass. I wonder if it was present last time too. It's a really catchy chorus though. There's a really nice sonic adherency to all of this. Yeah, I think I want to start with the production first. Primarily because, as I mentioned, there's a cohesion here that I think was a really smart decision. I'm not sure how they landed upon this sound. This could be years, multiple albums of refining a sound, or it just could be what they started with originally, but I really love the way that the fuzziness of the post-punk, which I know post-punk's like this massive umbrella term that relates to things that spawned from punk but weren't punk. It really doesn't signify much of a sound at all, but I do think of super fuzzy guitars when I think of post-punk for some reason. And I don't know why, because Talk Talk is one of the first bands I think no, are they called Talk? They're called Talk Talk, right? Maybe that was the song. Anyways, that was very clean. So I don't know why I particularly have this association. Maybe I'm thinking of post-rock? I don't know. Anyways, we have super fuzzy instruments here. The drums even have a bit of compression rather than being completely or mostly raw recording, just touching up the sound a little bit. There is some distortion on that. So, sorry, some compression. The guitars are just massively compressed. They're so fuzzy. Even the bass has kind of lost a lot of its punch in favor for a flatter, wider sound. And so to pair with this, the vocals have also been compressed. And this could be chicken and the egg thing. I don't know if they had the sound and then they put the vocals on top and compressed it to match, or if the vocalist already liked using a lot of compression on their sound and they made music to fit that. I don't know. It really doesn't matter. The end result is that everything just fits. There is sort of a mid-fi to lo-fi kind of element with the production of all these instruments, although the overarching production on the song itself is hi-fi. There's a clarity to everything, despite everything having a fuzziness that kind of blurs it all out. Like there's a fog on the individual instruments, but I can see specifically the different patches of fog. There's clarity in the larger landscape, but there's blurriness in specific areas, that kind of idea. The end result, though, is that these little pieces of fog over the instruments don't feel disjointed at all. Everything is sort of fuzzy, everything's sort of grungy, and it all kind of blurs together into a sound that just is very befitting. And by the time I think the second verse was over, I'd completely forgotten about this sonic characteristic that was residing around the entire track, and I began to listen to the bass for what it was playing, the guitar for what it was playing, the vocalist for what it was singing, and the fuzziness just became a background element to it all, more of a sonic characteristic that once you see, it's not really a strong aspect of it anymore. And so the whole song sort of bleeds together, whether the bass and guitar are playing the same thing, or they get split up, or it's just the drums, or it's just the bass, or it's just the vocals for a little bit. Everything feels like it stands on its own just fine and comes together into a, a Gundam of post-punk rapping. Everything just fits. It all should be disjointed, but it isn't. And I think a lot of it comes down to this decision from an early stage, I would suspect, of creating the sonic unison between all of our voicings. So I really like that. There is a bassiness throughout a lot of this track that create a very grounded weightiness to the song as a whole. It feels rooted, especially with the way the vocals come in. I think they also help to ground the song. And so I think it's an interesting juxtaposition then to have the guitar work as floaty as it is, as quick and light as it is. If everything else has this weighted, shackled to the ground feeling to it, the guitar line frequently makes it feel like we're trying to float away, and it's the shackle that's keeping us down, not gravity. And I think that is a very interesting way to go about composing this, to create that juxtaposition, to allow there to be some levity against the weight. Maybe this shows up in the lyrics, maybe it doesn't, but just as a sonic device, I think it works really well in this track, and I like the way that it does this, especially since I think it comes in particularly on the second verse. Maybe the chorus, I know our first verse was just a rhythmic pulse coming in from the guitar and bass. We didn't have this levity yet. So it was a moment of almost realization, like, oh, I'm not bound to the ground. That kind of feeling, like just out of nowhere, this dexterous guitar line comes in and it just recontextualizes the entire atmosphere of the track at that point. Fantastic decision to go that direction. And I'd say even the vocalizations that appear, I don't even remember when it was. Is that after the chorus leading back into the verse? that was just a really great decision to do. Another one of those sort of soaring melodic lines that doesn't draw a lot of attention to itself, but provides a levity and a direction of pitch placement in a range that doesn't really have much representation elsewhere. So when these moments come in, they feel like light shining through on a gloom day, a glum day, a gloomy day. I think is probably where I wanted to take that. And it's that little bit of levity, the hope, the silver lining. And I think it does a good job of being showcased in a variety of different ways on this track. And I think that's sort of all the discussion I have for the music. Aside from our verse and our chorus, we do have the bridge, which revisits some of the ideas we've previously heard in a more isolated context. And then we end up with our chorus again on our way out. Yeah, it is a catchy chorus, though. It is. And I love the way that he incorporates a little bit of a melodicness to his vocals during the chorus. He's not singing, but he is choosing pitches that correlate a little bit with the rhythmic bounciness of it. And I think that does a lot to separate it just enough from the fluid spoken word rapping, or spoken word aspect of the rapping that we hear in the verse, while we're still not intentionally, I think, aiming for specific pitches with lengths of syllables that are less talkative and more singy. I mean, that's one of the big differences between speech and singing is hanging on to syllables and having stuff like that. Choosing rhythmic devices that are less natural for speech and more natural for singing. And so we don't really incorporate too much of that. The rhythmic ideas, the time that we hang on to syllables, it still works more within the spoken word, but we do have this element of aiming ish for pitches and creating a bit of a melodic flow through it. That, like I said, is just a really nice juxtaposition to pretty much the pure rhythmic and textural focus in the verse. So that helps the chorus stand out a little bit as well and not create, but add a bit to the catchiness of it. With that said, this is a hip hop song somewhere along. I don't know if I'd say it's hip hop at its core, but it definitely has hip hop influences in it. We all knew this was coming. The lyrics are going to be a massive part here. It's a shorter analysis for the music, but that usually leaves time to dig into the lyrics, which tend to be a bit more of a highlighted or a spotlit element of the music. So without further ado, let me check those out. These lyrics are about going through life, and it seems primarily about a specific perspective on that, which I think is an interesting one we'll get into in a second. But by the time I was finished with this reading of the lyrics and I read it a second time, a phrase came to my mind, which I don't really hear too much anymore, but it was really popular in the 90s, late 90s and earlier 2000s down here in the South. At least, I don't, maybe it was popular everywhere. I heard it a lot down here, and it feels like a redneck thing to say, so I kind of associated it with Southern folk, but keep on keeping on. The idea that you've made it this far and you might not really know what you're doing, but you keep doing it, right? And in order to see the sun tomorrow, basically. And that's what this song feels like to me. Taking that one idea and just extrapolating it out into a lengthy dissection of it. The opening verse leads into a lot of humility, shows some humbleness, while also, I think, setting up some of the ideas that we'll expand further into later. It says, I'm a roach that a god is coming after, just a vessel for a natural disaster. A demise is running, better run faster. Says, now we fill the ground. If you kill me, you're gonna deal with roach number two. The idea that, if I die, someone's going to take my place. There's lots of us down here. Specifically calls himself a roach. And I like this idea um, that, you know, there's going to be negative around the corner. He says, I'm a vessel for natural disaster. Demise is trying to catch me. I'm just trying to outrun it. He's not up here rapping about how he's the god of this or, the best in the game at that or all the stuff that he has. He says, I'm a roach. I think that humility is, it speaks to me in the lyrics. He just kicks it off like that. Um, and he says, there's always some bad around the corner, and I'm just trying to outrun it. But if it ends up killing me, I'm not in this alone, right? You got more to deal with after that. And so it creates this vibe of both humility and connection. And this is important going forward. Moving into verse 2 says, there's no guide, there's no knowing. When you're going through hell, you just keep going. Your reality is showing. So hold the cross. I don't plan to be a martyr. I'm just a muck, and that's okay. The world is absurd until we pass away. This whole idea that we're all just kind of getting through life. There's no rules, there's no guides. You never really know what you're doing. And have we gotten to the part yet? Kind of. Well, the idea that there's no knowing how to live life, what's on the other side, what you should be doing, how you should be going about this. It's you just got to make your own way. And as he says, when the bad times catch up to you, when you're going through hell, you just got to keep going. There's going to be another side. There's going to be the light at the end of the tunnel. There's going to be the sun after the rain. There's something positive is on the other side. You just have to get through this. I like the idea where he says the world is absurd until we pass away. It's an interesting idea, and I read a bit of an interview that he had with Apple Music where he spoke about his concept of absurdity and absurdism, actually, specifically the philosophy of absurdism, and how the world sort of is absurd. And it's really interesting. If you get a chance, it has been copied into Genius. You can check it out there as well. It's in the Q&A under the lyrics. But it's not a it's not unfounded. There is a lot about life, especially living on this earth as we experience it. That's just kind of weird. I mean, even if you begin to think about our existence and why we're here, if you approach that from a non-religious perspective, things can get really absurd. And especially if you don't want to take it into the dread-filled nihilistic view of you just kind of happen to be here and you have a limited amount of time and then you return to the nothingness. That's kind of an absurd thing, especially when you realize that in the scope of infinite time, this is the blip against the non existence you were before and that you will return to, and that we try to make so much meaning out of nothing, the smallest fraction of a moment of our non existence. Um, like, you can get to some really absurd levels if you begin to extrapolate outward. And so I really like that line. The world's absurd until we pass away, particularly because you don't really need to worry about it much after that. If there is some sort of God, higher entity, some sort of spiritual afterlife, well, you're going to get your answers. And if there isn't, well, it won't matter if you get any answers. He follows this up with this globe doesn't hinge on morality. A lot of the world is run without morals. He says, but you're here and I'm here and we didn't earn this mortality. We didn't do anything to earn being alive today. We didn't do anything to earn not getting run over by a truck yesterday. We're just here. That's sort of the absurdity of it. Life is so fragile. The bridge continues on with this idea, says, I can't see and I don't know, I don't see where to go. The idea that life is sort of just about bumbling through it. There's no right way, there's no answers, there's no guides. And I think this is why the chorus hits so hard for me. It says, stay blessed. If you're alive to listen to this, you're blessed. So stay blessed. I really like that whole idea here. We're all in this together. None of us know what's going on. But if you woke up today, you got to see a new sunrise or a moonrise if you're a night owl, your life's going pretty good. That's a really good perspective to have. Even in the worst days, you woke up. You got to experience another day. Those are my thoughts on Genesis Owusu Stay Blessed. Let me know what you thought of this track. Anything that you might want to add, your own perspective, thoughts, comments, any of it, put all that stuff down in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu. You can find my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. We're going to be checking out a full album. I think it's November. The Blue. Yeah, it is November's The Blue. Oh, it's very cold artwork. I mean, very blue artwork, but I mean, I think that makes sense given the album title. I think we're going to be in for something quite moody. Oh man, the second track's called Cobalt of March. We have Blue, Blue Crazy? Blue Crazy, maybe? Iridescence? I wonder how many other like blue shades I don't know about are being utilized in this track in these track titles. Anyways, we gotta wrap this up. Those are my thoughts. Be critical, not cynical. See you all next time. I don't remember where I was at. So just have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, and I'll catch you guys next time.